Boy, I hope that you have asked to share slides,
Well, okay, request slides. I don't know, is that,
and I have passed slide control to you.
okay, but I gotta select my slides. Oh, there we go. I see.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. So you'll start those in a moment. Uh, okay, so this is the CBOR or a CBOR interim working group meeting. I'm Paul Hoffman. I am your chair today. Both Barry and Christian, the last moment, had other things going on. We have an hour. This is an official IETF working group meeting. I'm not going to go through like slides that have the expected code of conduct. But basically, we are all expected to treat each other as professionals. And again, this is like a face-to-face meeting. Hopefully, somebody is taking minutes in the document. That won't be me because I'm supposed to be running the meeting. Um, if you have a, if you are attending and such, feel free to do that over where you saw that in the agenda. We have a reasonably, full agenda already, which is that and again, we've just got an hour. The main topic is the CBOR serialization document and the issues that were resolved in the last draft. And we've got a bunch of open issues, including a couple pull requests. Part of that, so some of the mailing list discussion has been around the NANs and how do we mark them and such. And there was a lightweight agreement that we should do this as a separate document that can be referred to in the main working group document. So we'll have a discussion of that, but we'll do that at the end because NANs can suck up an infinite amount of time. So given that, I would say here, I'm having an issue finding there's the window. Why don't we just jump right in? Lawrence, you've got some slides and some discussion. So please take it away.
Okay. So I'm gonna first talk about the pull requests that went into O1. I just want to review them so people know what went in them and see if there's some discussion on them. Make sure people are kind of aware of them. Uh, so, and then we'll do open issues after that. So hopefully this goes quickly, but we'll see. I filled in the CDDL operators that was previously to do. I chose .ord seek for ordinary encoding and ordinary encoding of a sequence, and .det for .det sequences names. And there's IANA registrations for them, and there's some text on the scope of these operators, basically the extent of, when you say I want deterministic serialization that does not cross byte string wrapping boundaries. I think the main point of discussion here would be, if .det and .ord are already taken. Karsten says they are, and how it relates to naming of ordinary and deterministic serialization, which is one of the open issues. So I don't think there's anything here except we just need to make sure that we like the names, and I'm perfectly happy to change them. So let's leave the discussion on that till naming and later. The next thing was there's a new appendix on byte string wrapping. It's an appendix because it's not normative text, but one of the goals I've had for this document, and based on the consent, we're after consensus here, is to capture a lot of the discussions that we've had that were took us a long time to figure out. And so one of them is an appendix on byte string wrapping, like why you'd use it and such. So, and that's an appendix because it's not normative. I added an appendix on checking decoders. Again, that's not normative stuff. One of the key things is that I wanted to address is that clarify is that checking decoders are not a substitute and not required for full proper input validation that's always expected. So that's kind of half of the text there, but it does say what a checking decoder is and clarifies that it is not about looking for CBOR that's not well formed or invalid. It's about compliance with or checking that for compliance with a serialization scheme. There's a very minor clarification on deterministic encoding of the epoch date tag 1. And then there's a paragraph that says sorting is for determinism, not for apps or the data model. That was something that came clear on the list in discussion with Karsten and Vadim that I thought was a useful thing to add. I'm not sure I like where it sits in the document, but I think that's a good thing. It's part of the normative text on deterministic encoding. Yeah, Karsten?
So I have a question about tag 1.
Yeah.
Section 3.4 of RFC 8949 says that tags can define their own equivalence relationships. And I'm wondering whether what you wrote there is just very specific to the term deterministic encoding as it is used here, or is this a general change to how tag 1 operates?
Oh, it's definitely not a change to how tag 1 operates. It's in an appendix, and I think it's framed as a possible way to do deterministic encoding for these tags.
Okay, so in my terminology, this is ALDR and not deterministic encoding.
I suppose, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's that that appendix that has proposals for how to deterministically encode a bunch of tags, common tags. It was seeing those examples that made me able to understand ALDR. So that's one of the reasons they're in there. They're in an appendix. I don't think they're critical to the document, but they were really helpful in conveying some concepts, and I thought they might be useful. So I'm fine with there's some debate over that. Even if you wanted to take the whole appendix out, I think if there's consensus for that, that's okay.
So we had a discussion of a CBOR-based protocol this morning, and we essentially arrived at something which I think is very similar to what you're doing here. And it's, of course, what DCBOR already makes you do. So we may have an interesting confluence, if not consensus, here. But I think it's really important that we are clear about the normative intent of this. I wanted to add this. And on the last item, map sorting is for determinism. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
We are not doing it for the apps or the data model, but it's also maybe useful to note that once you have map sorting, you can structure the code of your app in a particular way that is harder to do if the maps come in randomly. And I think that's an observation that seems to run counter to what this bullet item here says, but which is a very practical observation.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Easier dupe detection.
No. The point is that if you have deterministic map entry ordering, you know at a specific point that you should have seen certain keys already if they are in there. And in the CoAP protocol, we use that a lot. So that has a deterministic ordering of the options. And it's just good to know, oh, I have seen all URI path components, so I don't have to expect another one or a new one if there wasn't one in the first place. And that's really can simplify code on constrained devices.
Okay. Joe,
So
could you?
I'm gonna jump in here wearing my chair hat. We've got a couple things in this document, especially from the things on this slide, where we are making up terms of like, oh, it's in the appendix and therefore it's not normative and such. Other working groups have had a horrible problem with that in the past, where an RFC is published and there is stuff that was like everyone was supposed to understand that, oh, it was in the appendix and it wasn't normative, or it was in the appendix and it still was normative and such. So we're going to need to have much better labeling, certainly on a section level, but as Karsten just pointed out, on even on a paragraph level. So if people agree with what Karsten had just said, for example, about sorting for determinism, that here's a hint about why you might want to do it, that has to be super clear even before you give the hint. That's not expected in the current draft, and we haven't even really decided what we want to do with the current appendices. But before we're done, the document, somebody who's reading the document for the first time has to be able to understand this is part of, this is absolutely part of the document. This is just a hint. And maybe even at that point understand why we're giving a hint. So I'm definitely looking to people on the list to propose additional wording for the normativeness or the hintiness of sections and even paragraphs. Rowan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so actually I was kind of hoping that we could get a consensus calls on some of the things which were in the document even before these PRs were merged, and record that consensus so we don't have to endlessly revisit them on the list.
Do you have any specific ones? And if so,
I
can you
do.
send them to the list?
Well, they've been discussed on the list multiple times, but I'd say
No. Can you send to the list the fact that you would like to have a specific consensus call on this topic, which is either this section, this subsection, or whatever? And that, I think that will help nail things down if you are specific about which ones we believe are nailed down and which ones we aren't.
Okay. I was kind of hoping that we would be able to do that in an interim as well, because I think it's easier when we have sort of high bandwidth time than
yeah, but one of the reasons that I exist here is the fact that the interims have, in fact, not worked that well that way. Even when there's agreement within an interim, then it goes to the list possibly months later and it gets litigated and such like that. My strong preference is that if you have a thing that you want nailed down in the document, you say so on the mailing list. We have a consensus call right then. And by the way, you don't have to wait for a chair to start a consensus call. An individual can say, I think that, having looked over the mailing list, I think that there is consensus on this being core or this being locked down. And then it gets discussed. It doesn't have to be an official call or anything like that. And at the end of that, someone can say, this is the way it looks. Now, that might be a chair if it's dicey, or if everyone's agreeing, that's fine. And then Lawrence, the document author, knows in his head to put fence posts around certain text. I am a strong disbeliever in doing things like that in an interim call where there are only 4 or 5 people, and we have a history of having things relitigated afterwards.
Okay. I guess I'm fine with that. I guess my concern is that without having an opportunity to have a high bandwidth discussion, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that we're going to understand what people's actual positions are among people who have posted numerous times on the list, and the only
Mm-hmm.
person who has posted on these 2 issues that isn't on the interim right now is Anders. So Vadim and Karsten and
If we've got time at the end, we can do that. But again, I'm really hesitant to go to the list and say during the interim this was discussed. Again, as an outsider who just came in a
understood.
couple of months
Yeah.
ago, I see discussions like that from in the last couple of years, and I see that they in fact don't get instantiated in the document. So my preference is things where everyone can say, look at that. That's where we're at. So let's see if we have time for some of those, Rowan, at the end. But if not, and if you want to wait for the next interim, that's fine. I believe the mailing list is going to hate this word, but deterministic enough of a place to do these.
Okay.
So Lawrence, why don't you go ahead?
So, Joe, action items for normativeness of appendix for tag, the name for .dat, and Karsten's hint about deterministic sorted encoding. Okay, next slide. A whole slide for NANs. Oh no. There was a big PR about NANs. Pretty much all it did was change the appendix and just made it more detailed and more careful about what it said. And the point of the appendix is to capture all the knowledge gained about NANs and non-trivial NANs. What I've tried to do is minimize the mention of NANs in the normative text. Basically, really, it's only to say that there's the requirement to use half-precision quiet NANs. So this is a good opportunity to say that I'm really trying to put the normative text in the non-appendix part, and all the appendix stuff is non-normative clarifications and stuff like that. Then I will point out that one of the changes in the appendix on NANs was a new subsection that gives a more clear description of what RFC 89 handling of NANs is. I realize I'm on a little bit of thin ice there because it's kind of a restatement of a standard, and maybe we should bracket that some. Maybe I didn't bracket it well enough and say that 8949 is still the normative text, but I thought it was really useful to give the more clear description of what RFC 89 does for NANs all in one place. So, it goes and says, and it unfolds it by saying, the data model for all of CBOR outside of tags for NANs is that that they are, equal. And that the shortest length encoding is based on that equivalence, and the map sorting comparison is also based on that equivalence. I believe that's the sort of top-down way to say it, and a clear way to say it. So, And that's it for what went into the 01 draft. So the rest is just issues. There's 2 PRs open. They're just minor things. They're not one is some rewording and the other is to add a contributor. So I'm going to go on to the issues now, unless we want to spend some time on NANs. Okay.
We've got time at the, after this to discuss the, whether the group wants to do what was suggested the last week or so of picking up a new draft to handle the NAN stuff. So why don't you not NAN for now?
Yeah. I mean, I will say this is that draft is in addition to everything here. It's just completely complementary. There's no conflict or rewrite or anything moving, refactoring or of anything. It's just in addition. Okay, so the issues, I'm keeping the open issue list in GitHub. That's kind of the to-do list. Discussion in GitHub is fine for things where we kind of have consensus and we're just talking about wording or something like that. But I keep redirecting any larger discussion which there's not consensus on to the mailing list. So I don't expect long discussions in GitHub issues. So one of the to-dos is to fill in the test vectors. I plan to include non-conforming tests. Another one is whether ordinary serialization is the right name. I'm thinking to add a new subsection that says when to use general serialization. That would parallel the subsections that say when to use ordinary and when to use deterministic, and some of the text out of the ordinaries. When to use ordinary will go into when to use general. It just seems like better, clearer organization. And then I want to create a new top-level recommendations section, and that's, I think maybe we're in for some debate on that. So I think this is my last slide. Yeah, this is my last slide. And then it just let's make it free for all for discussion on the open issues. But here's kind of my proposal. I still consider this a work in progress, but I think we can lead with a simple message to CBOR library implementers and to protocol designers and protocol implementers, and that is use ordinary serialization. Deterministic is good too if you're not encoding in a constrained environment, because one of the things I learned from looking at a lot of implementations in detail is that in some environments sorting is really easy. A lot of features are really a lot easier to implement in environments like Python and Ruby, where they're not easy to implement in things like C, C++, and Rust. But of course, C, C++, and Rust are critical for CBOR use cases, so we cannot dismiss them, right? And I think this simple message kind of works because most libraries already support preferred serialization, which is basically identical to ordinary for all practical purposes. So it's kind of just formalizing what the community is doing. So that's what I'd like to lead with. And then in the small print, I put it that way intentionally. It's small print. If you use float or streaming and all that, then you need to look at then you might look at something else. All right, I think I'm mostly done for slides.
So Lawrence, before you leave that slide, which I think is going to be the one that we will discuss most now, are you feeling that these recommendations are going to be should level for implementers, or that this will be a discussion, more of a discussion of what people, what implementers, what library writers and such have discovered over the last few years as without saying to an implementer or to a library maker, you should do, like if you are following, if you're going to quote this RFC, you should be doing it this way. What is your feeling currently on that?
I called it a recommendation. I didn't really think about, should, must, or what, but it's definitely in the line of should and not in the line of this is what everybody's been doing. It's like, and the reason I would say that is I think we want to make at least a sort of authoritative statement, sort of not leaving everybody else trying to figure out what to do. It's just like, you should do this, trust us, we figured it out.
Okay. And so that would actually be a should. For those of you who haven't been around forever, the word recommended and the word should are equivalent if we call in the what used to be 2119 language. And therefore, they have some constraints on them. And one of the constraints on should is if you have a should level statement, you also really, really should have at least a statement of saying what will happen if you don't do this. And a lot of RFCs leave that out, and that sucks for implementers. So this working group should very much, before we are done with this document, figure out what level we want of that. And again, since we're not saying must, what we say to somebody who's read it and says, I don't want to do this, like what we can say to them about what will happen or what they should do so that people know what they're doing otherwise.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so let's do a mic line. Carson?
Thank you. So there are two questions here. One is, this is a recommendation, but not in the RFC 2119 sense. So we have to be very careful about what we recommend. I mean, don't use go-tos in your implementation is a recommendation, but we are not going to make it a 2119 requirement. And so ordinary serialization has two elements, the definite length only one and the preferred serialization part. And of course, everybody loves preferred serialization. So this is what we could recommend an implementer to use, but there is no consequence for not doing that. And that's the other question I want to bring up, is the use ordinary serialization. So that doesn't work. We have to be a little bit more specific about what that means. And I'm sending a link to the chat that has a little bit more detail than I want to say at the mic. So we have to be very specific about what interoperability constraints we offer. And we have to be very specific about that somebody has to make a choice here. So this document does not retroactively change all CBOR-based protocols, but it provides names for choices that future specifiers of protocols can pick up. And I think that's a very important distinction that we have to keep up.
Hi.
Okay, thank you. Rowan?
I think this is a should, because every should says you should do this unless you have a good reason not to. Here's some of the reasons you might have not to do this. I think it's very clear that we can say if you have a good reason to do your own thing, go for it. If you don't know what to do, this is a good, safe choice. Please go do this. That's kind of it.
Thanks. Joe?
I was going to say something similar to Rowan, actually. If this ends up being a BCP, then this is the key best current practice to recommend. And if we can figure out the right wording so that it doesn't either feels like 2119 or doesn't feel like 2119, I'm okay either way. You could be talked into that either way. But having some recommendations to protocol designers about choose this for these cases, don't choose it if you've got these cases, feels like the heart of the entire matter.
Thanks, Joe. I put myself in the queue partially to say a similar thing. Karsten, you had said earlier, there are no consequences for doing this. And then you followed by saying, except interoperability. And that's exactly, I think, where this document is going, is to say, here are some good ideas. And if you implement this named set of these good ideas, you will have this kind of interoperability. And that easily leads to a should level recommendation, which is you should do this if it works for you. And if you don't, you will not have interoperability over this way or whatever. We don't have those words yet. Certainly that will be a discussion in the group, but saying here's a bunch of names of things might be useful, but it would be much more useful if the working group actually agreed on the use of those names between things. And certainly my reading of the mailing list is that there's lots of people saying things like, but my implementation does this, which is great. And then someone should know, oh, if their implementation does this named thing and my implementation does this named thing, there's going to be interoperability, or at least this level of interoperability. Joe, is that an old hand or new? Not hearing you, so I'm assuming it's old. Martine.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of the talk, so if I say something that was already said, sorry, I was stuck in traffic. But yeah, I basically read both Lauren's draft and Carsten's draft, so I am a little bit more deeper into the material than I used to be. But I'm not collected my thoughts enough to say something qualitative here. But for this slide specifically, I'm a little bit confused because you say that most libraries already preferred, which is identical with ordinary, but as far as I understand, ordinary is preferred plus the definite length constraint, right? Yes. And I think that is a problem to make that a recommendation, because if we, for example, want to stream out just the time series in an array, then we basically say the application don't do that.
I don't think that's what we're saying, but I'll let you continue.
Well, we say that we want to, that you should use ordinary serialization. So you basically disallow indefinite length.
So Martine, let me jump in here as
Yeah.
somebody who doesn't have a dog in this fight. This slide is, as Lawrence said, is a work in progress.
Yes.
And it does not say use ordinary serialization. It says, if you want this and this and this, you can use ordinary serialization. So this is not a statement of, I mean, so you're looking at a slide, and I'm assuming you're not looking at, the recommendation section at the moment.
Yeah, I didn't read the most current version of the draft yet.
Okay, yeah. So, which is one of the things that we're discussing. So the idea for, or a possible idea for the working group, depends on whether we get consensus or not, is to make recommendations that are on the level of, if you do this, or if you want this, you should do this. But there's nothing that says you have to do this or that, not only because we're not the internet police, but because one of the things on the mailing list we've seen over and over is that people have different constraints. Karsten is by far the largest cheerleader for highly constrained devices, which have constraints in some different directions and such like that. So if we end up with a should that is too draconian, that's not going to help anybody. We need to get the wording correct here.
Yes, but I guess that's what I'm saying. So yeah, we should
Okay.
be. If most libraries already support preferred, then we maybe should say, yeah, you use preferred. If you want to have, if you want to avoid this and that, as you said, then use ordinary. Yeah, maybe if this wording is like this, I would be fine with that as well.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so as we have this discussion, please do participate on the
Yes.
list, especially if you see some wording that is making it hard for one of the use cases you care about. That either that wording can be removed, or the wording can be further changed to say, unless you have this.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Karsten?
Yeah, so I have a slide reference from the chat if you want to look at the actual text of the document. But it's really interesting, because when it describes ordinary serialization, it says the purpose of ordinary serialization is to provide interoperability without requiring support for indefinite length decoding. The purpose of ordinary serialization is not requiring support for indefinite length encoding. So that is the interoperability constraint. And that's all of the interoperability constraint right now. And then we have another paragraph which says ordinary serialization also provides a size efficiency gain. Implementation is typically find encoding and decoding in this form to be straightforward. Yeah, that's true. But the confusing part here is that we are using a term, and half of it, the definite length only half, is about interoperability, and the other half isn't. And I don't think that's a very good way to structure things. Yeah, I would really prefer if the serialization choices were orthogonal to the data model choices. Yeah, but that's a long story. I just wanted to point out that the simple term use ordinary serialization is useless, because use does not reflect the fact that there are decisions that have to be made on interoperability constraints, both in the producer and the consumer of the CBOR. So look at my slides if you want a few more details of that.
Okay, thanks. Lawrence?
Okay, so preferred serialization says do the shortest length thing, and then I think it says, I don't remember the exact word off the top of my head, but I believe it says, and use definite length unless, and definite length should be, is always preferred unless you don't know the length. So it's already, preferred serialization already kind of says you should use definite length. So I don't think and I think most of the world, the CBOR community assumes that preferred serialization is more or less definite length only. I think even in this discussion group, we didn't realize the wording for preferred serialization was had wiggle room in it around definite lengths. So, Karsten has said, he's just said that ordinary serialization is some efficiency stuff plus and half efficiency and half definite length. I actually don't think that's true. I think a really big part of preferred serialization is to use definite lengths when you can. It's not definite length only, but it's pretty close. So that's why I felt okay saying it's identical for all practical purposes. And again, this is, I mean, it's also true that the wording on the slide is not, I mean, it's just a initial kind of proposal. So, but I basically think the world is running on ordinary serialization already, and in that most people that implement preferred have done it and with definite length only, and they did it that way because the decoders don't support indefinite lengths, and then people realize that the decoders don't support indefinite lengths, so then the encoders don't support indefinite lengths. So I think that's why I've kind of felt it's kind of safe to say this, and it lines up with the should, and it's sort of just documenting existing practice.
Okay, although I would love to see more specific words on that in the document. Again, my view, not wearing my working group chair hat, but as somebody who ends up having to read documents on topics that I don't know anything about, is that I would want to know all the background coming into any of these. So, Karsten?
Yeah, Lawrence, you had a pretty good observation here. The last paragraph of section 4.1 makes exactly the mistake I would like us not to do again, which is it says, it uses the term preferred in its English sense. And to most, well, at least my brain said, to most people it will be clear that this is not an interoperability constraint, because the conditional on which this is based is not something that the other end has any say in. But we just said something there without explicitly identifying that it is not part of the interoperability constraint that might be derived from this section. And more generally speaking, I think it would be good not to try to derive an interoperability constraint from preferred encoding, except, of course, in deterministic encoding, where we use exactly that. There are some people who kind of hope that by using preferred encoding without deterministic encoding, they can reap the benefits of deterministic encoding without paying for that, and that doesn't work. But that's a separate discussion. My main point here was that we need to be specific in what we are trying to tell people. Oh, by the way, this is good practice. Do this unless you have a reason not to do that. And this is what we mean by the interoperability constraint, ordinary, what's it called? Ordinary serialization. Because you have made very clear that this is just the interoperability constraint for definite length only.
Thanks. And also, Carson, I would love to see some wording from you on the point that you made, not the last point, but the point before it, which is some implementers are doing X because they see it's for free or whatever. And we should be saying that. We, like, a document like this should have that in it. So if you see bits of that where it's like this, oh, and maybe that, I think we should call it out, and I would love to see wording like that from you. Rowan.
Hello. Okay, so I think I finally understood what Karsten was on about for the previous 10 minutes. You don't want, you're happy to have a thing that says use definite length, but I think I understood that you don't want it combined with preferred serialization. And I think what I heard you say is that you don't want people to get confused and think that they could use ordinary when maybe what they might need might be deterministic encoding. Did I get that right? Carson?
Go ahead.
I'm not sure
Carson.
I understood the last sentence. Can you say it again?
You want definite length as an option without preferred encoding. And what I think I understood is that you think that by having what we're calling ordinary serialization in this document, that people will somehow get confused and use it when you think they should really be using deterministic encoding.
Well, as I said,
I'm looking for a yes or no here, dude.
the phrase "use it"
I'm
doesn't have a
asking-
meaning, so
no,
I
I'm
cannot
not
answer yes or no
confused
because you
question.
said a sentence that doesn't have a meaning.
I'm asking you a yes or no question. Is
Yes,
that your
and I'm saying
concern?
your sentence did not have a meaning.
Okay. You're being way too pedantic in that case. Do you
So
want? What do you want?
the
Because
point
you're not
is
making
that
yourself clear.
this document is trying to make a few recommendations in the English sense, not in the 2119.
Are you
sense.
okay with ordinary encoding as it's ordinary serialization as it is written, modulo changes to the name? Yes
What
or
is
no?
okay? I think
Are
it's
you
a
sort of
bad
document that
bad
goes through
approach
with that,
to
with
put
a
these two
definition?
different things into one term. But yes,
Wait,
we can do that.
You asked me to rephrase what I meant. So
Yes.
what I meant. So would you object to a document, CBOR working group document going forward that contains something very similar to what is in the definition of ordinary serialization modulo, changes to the name of the serialization, encoding, serialization mechanism, what have you?
Well, I was trying to say that the term currently
I'm asking you a
has
yes or
two
no question.
components that don't fit together. You can force fit them.
Okay, wait. Stop, you two. This is exactly why I don't like doing things in an interim at the mic. Wait, Rowan, I asked you both to stop. So I'm going to be the chair here. I think, Rowan, your questions are perfectly reasonable, and I think Karsten's responses are also reasonable, although not helpful to your questions. So please take these questions to the list, because I think, Rowan, you are asking something that was related to what you had said much earlier in the meeting, which was that you want to know where we have consensus on how to do certain things in the document. And I think that that's a very important question. And I don't think that can be done at a mic line, particularly because I believe that other people who are not going to jump in the mic line are going to, in fact, have opinions. So I prefer this to be deferred to the list.
So my problem is that I found particularly given the length and quantity of Karsten's comments, for his actual position to be undecipherable on the mailing list. And
that's
why
fine.
I'm trying to ask him a question in a high bandwidth setting where he could represent himself clearly and concisely.
But he isn't, and therefore we are just cycling at the mic line, which happens at face-to-face meetings as well.
Please see the chat.
It was worth a try.
Okay, it was worth a try, and I'm sort of trying to end this because we still have another topic and we only have 10 minutes. Lawrence, did you have anything left on this before we go on to our next favorite topic, which is NANs?
Yes, I do. Carsten said that, he kind of wants to pull apart the efficiency gains from shortest length and such from the interoperability constraint of definite length only. I understand that those are two separate things. But preferred serialization combined them. The world combines them. It's easy to combine them. It makes sense to combine them. Having one thing we talk about, I think, is one recommendation I think is good. And when you put them together that way, deterministic serialization becomes just the increment of map sorting, and that's also conceptually very easy. So I can see maybe in an appendix discussing the difference between an interoperability constraint and efficiency, but I still like the idea of saying something like, you should use ordinary serialization unless you got a reason not to.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the last part of the agenda, because we do now have less than 10 minutes. And I'm not expecting anything to from this discussion to actually affect much, but there has been a request that the working group consider draft McNally CBOR NAN Beaster, or Bister, however one wants to pronounce it in whichever language. And I would like to get a general feeling here for whether that is a thing we want to do at all, whether we want to do it now, or whether we want to defer it until after we are done with serialization. The reason I'm asking is because some people have said it's not really related to serialization, but there were comments saying if it existed, the serialization document could point to it as in a certain fashion. So I would like to open the floor to anybody who has read the new NAN document, which again is draft McNally CBOR NAN Beaster, and say whether they would like to see it adopted, and if so, when. Carson, you're first in line.
Yeah, so the document addresses a limitation of CBOR, and the right thing to address the limitation of CBOR is to put something in the extended data model. What is exactly what it does by defining a tag. So the question is, can we add support for NANs in other lengths than 64 bits? 64-bit NANs are fully supported by CBOR as is, but 32-bit and 16-bit NANs have certain properties that can be a hindrance in certain environments. So it makes sense to define such a tag if there is actually a use case for using NANs with binary 32 or binary 16. I don't see a strong use case, which would be my normal response to this. But I also see that we sunk a lot of cost into this discussion. So we might want to carry home the fruit, even if we don't eat them right away.
Okay, thank you. Lawrence?
Yes, let's bring home the fruit, even if we don't eat it.
Okay, so wait, don't go away, Lawrence. So do you believe we should adopt this document now or after we have cleared like serialization?
I would be adopt it now and then have them to go together so the serialization draft can reference it. And I think that'll
Where
help.
in the serialization draft do you see reference, since you're the author? Where do you see the references?
In the appendix. It's non-normative.
So this would be a non-normative reference saying, by the way, if NANs are your fruit, go take a look at this.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Joe, I thought I saw your hand, but then it looks like it went away. No hand. Okay. Other comments on when we might do this? Okay. I will discuss with the co-chairs on how we want to do it. I hear Lawrence's suggestion that it would be useful in the serialization draft. I certainly, as somebody who could give a flying whatever about NANs, have noticed how interesting they are on the mailing list to people. And therefore, I imagine a reader of the serialization draft could and might be one of those people who goes like, wait a second, what about NANs? And so having something there would be good. If the working group doesn't think it's going to delay the serialization document, that if this first round of the new draft is reasonably well put together, and therefore we don't have to spend much time on honing it, I can see them going together so that the reference that Lawrence wants will not hold up the document. So, okay, very good. Thank you all. There's another meeting planned. Oh, Lawrence, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, there's even a possibility that addressing it now will accelerate the serialization draft, because then we don't have to discuss it in the serialization draft.
Yes.
Wolf is doing the work, and anybody that really is, excited about this, then we could say, well, we're doing it for you, so, chill out.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds good. Okay, so there is another interim meeting scheduled for January. I don't remember exactly when. I will talk with my co-chairs about being a little bit better prepared for it. So having an agenda a week ahead of time, not 12 hours or 14 hours ahead of time. And again, this is a place, I don't want to speak for Barry or Christian, but this is a place where Barry and Christian and I are not in alignment. As I said at the beginning of this meeting, I strongly believe that most of this should be being done on the mailing list so that other people who are not as active but do actually have opinions can participate or at least follow better than this. So thank you for coming to the meeting, and see you all on the list. Take care.